thing, but for me, a more subversive, a less recognizable act or process or experience that we've had is that in which would cause sister to try to protect and keep her son from manning up. You know, a boy gets to a certain point in life, he starts to become a man, he sees something wrong done to his mother, his sisters, or whoever, he wants to step out and protect them. That's our natural, psych acknowledged it, protection being a part of our role. And when we're not able to do that, with the sister, put a hand on our chest and push us back behind, and basically teaching men not to buck up to white folks. Don't put your chest out, bend over, put your head down, don't look them in the eye. All of those things that we had to do to survive, not knocking her, but the reality of it is when you take that over generations from a boy attempting to become a man, now his manhood is no longer tied into any sense of protection of the family. Now he's got to set all of that aside and be less than a man in order to just survive, and for his family to survive, and all of those things. So it becomes very insidious to the point we can't even recognize it. We can recognize buck breaking and that sort of thing, but a sister protecting her son, how do you argue against that? How do you tell?
Evolving barbaric hieroglyphs, I spit my gifts, shift the surface with vernacular skill. The rawest live, touching down like meteors, none other than black gods. Stones in my timepiece coming from black stars. Negativity keep far away from doors. Single-mindedly destroying the ops and the odds. Just another warrior's quest. The past may get rest. Demons coming for my crown, get beheaded like the next. These blessings never threats, just to verbalize a message, catching energies of critics. All the Atari get deaded. Pray I stay alert on the field, be skillmatic in anything my enemies deal. Be dead actions I proceed, just life I lead beneath it. So many seas to win. It's our time to align stars, so spirits lead. Who could war with me, catastrophically or audibly? Given no choice by God's law, I'm Lucifer on streets.
Peace and power. Once again, this is Panther 48 coming at you. We got Brother E coming out of Florida.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We got Brother Robert Ward Williams calling out of California.
All power to the people.
And we got myself, Brother Syke, calling out of Texas. Today, we're going to build on the concept of family and how that ideal and those concepts and ideals pertain to the community, revolutionaries, and the Panther organization as a whole. So let's start with probably the most simple question that we could possibly answer or ask as it pertains to family. What is the basic definition of family? Anybody want to jump on that? Now, do I need to give y'all that?
I start off just real quick, given the basic thing. It's it's defined typically as a social unit consisting of parents and children to make up a group, whether they stay in the same dwelling or not. That's the bottom line. Or it can also be a group of people who share common interests, ties, goals, or settings. That's what is normally defined as a family. But I know later on, as we get going, we want to break that down even further to draw into basically what we really want to get at as it applies to Panther ideology. But when people think of the definition of family, that's the basic definition they think of.
But E, you look like you wanted to add something to that. I saw certain expressions go across your face as he was building on that.
Nah, that's fine, I guess. I think it was, I thought he was really gonna give like a dictionary textbook definition, but then he just kind of meandered all over the place. Whatever, that's cool.
Well, I have a definition of family on kind of like, this is more than a definition, it's kind of like a build up or breakdown. To me, family is an organization, probably the first organization in human history. And I kind of think that all other organizations are built off of that platform. I mean, if we look at, let's look at a tribe, and essentially a tribe was essentially the uniting multiple families, many families. You may have, let's make Brother War the head of the family. Let's make him the patriarch. Let's make him the head of the family. And he and his wife, let's say they have 6 kids, you know, and each of these 6 kids, let's say they have three or 4 grandkids, children apiece. So War got all these grandkids now. And let's say brother E is War's brother, and brother E is basically essentially done the same thing. So in their family, they have created kind of a power structure in their family. And when they see the strength in their family, they may decide to unite with other families that live in close proximity to them, which creates our first villages and our first communities, you know. And so when we think of family, I think that when you think of family and you think of merging with another human being in order to build a family, I think that thing cannot be done based completely off fleeting emotions, but it has to be done the way people would do a business merger. You know, when trying to think of some companies, I can't even come to mind just off the top right now. But when a profitable company decides to merge with another company, one of the things that I think a company wants to know is that other company is profitable as well. You really don't want to merge with a company that's failing unless you feel like you could take over that company and actually build your resources more by completely developing and devouring that company. But when a man gets with a woman, that's not what he's trying to do. At least that shouldn't be what he's trying to do. He should see the ability of him and her to come together and be a strength from their unity, or them coming together, them uniting with one another. That's what I see family as the cornerstone of community, as the foundation of community itself.
Well, I think that just basically pulls us into the point of reference of what a family means to us. So I would say this: when we talk about what the point of reference of what a family is, now we go into how America defines the family unit and the family structure. And I think that's where it takes a detour, because the family at that point is defined based upon the industrialization and has more to do with the economic aspect of what a family is than it has to do with the social biological patterns that Brother Syke is talking about. So then when you get into the family unit as it applies to the economic welfare and being as pushed upon it by the society, the current society and the current trends, now we're talking about the collection and the bond that comes together that allows them to be able to get the most out of cohabitating and maneuvering within that industrialization environment versus 2 people coming together for the sake of reproduction and building a legacy to grow upon. So now we in a whole different dynamic at that point, because in the modern day times when you talk about family, the family don't necessarily come together to produce offspring. They come together to make certain benefits as it applies to their economic building together within this environment. So I think now we have to talk on that a little bit based on what Syke just said.
Well, that should be how families strengthen themselves. You know, that should actually be how a family develops strength, like you just said, coming together for economic development. But I know that we know, and we see this a lot in our communities, in the Black communities, that a lot of times people lack the basic knowledge needed to strengthen themselves personally, economically. So the last thing that they're able to do is unite with other people, even though these are their family members, their kin, to do the same thing. But is what a family is supposed to be able to do. It's supposed to be able to create that guardianship. I remember when I was growing up, and this is not on the economic level, but this is on I guess you could say on a power level, on a smaller degree. When I was growing up in the neighborhood I grew up in, there was a few families that was huge. I mean, a whole bunch of cousins, they all brothers and sisters, all went to the same school together, and basically they had their own gang essentially. And a lot of times in these neighborhoods, these families actually became the foundation of the gang, or the street gang that would come from that neighborhood. And everybody wanted to join or be a part of what these guys had going on. Essentially, you couldn't fight one of them. You know, you couldn't abuse one of them, you couldn't rob one of them, you couldn't do anything negative to one of them because you knew that the kinfolk, the brother, everybody was coming behind that. You know, and I bring up that point because I think that is a natural atavistic throwback to how we behave as a species of people. I think that was just natural. I don't think that they organized that or planned that, and the fact that it was so many of them wasn't even a part of functionality, so to speak. It was part of that dysfunction that I'm pretty sure that we're going to get into later, of how the traditional family that came that naturally developed in our evolution has basically essentially been eliminated, because now you have the baby mama and the baby daddy family. You know, you have that. You have a woman could have the offspring of 3 different men now, and so now there's no true real tie there between that man and that woman, or that man and those children. You know what I'm saying? Because that bloodline has been allowed to. One of the most precious things that a woman can give a man is her womb in order to start developing his bloodline. But if the womb is basically community womb, and I don't mean to be disrespectful when I say that, then it's not as special as it once was. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, I'm just being honest. We got to be real when we have these conversations. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if we could flip the same thing on a man, you know, because if a man's job is to provide, protect, you know, refine and respect, and if that's his job, and usually traditionally a man would have his bloodline through this one woman, or I guess I can't really say that, but he'd have his bloodline through this woman, and all his woman, his children, everything was under his roof. If that was the case, nowadays we have a man, he might have 5 different kids all over the city by 5 different women, and a possible. You know what I'm saying? So it kind of creates a wall in between that unity that may have existed with a traditional family. You know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
Well, I mean, the like everything else in this bastard sick shit society, the social construct is still kind of there, because even back in the day, if you were able to afford it, you could have several wives or concubines or whatever it is, living at different places and whatnot. But what's gone is the responsibility involved. They took the substance and the meaning and the significance and the contribution to the overall structure of society and the community, got rid of that and just said, go have some fun, you know, and reduced it to its most primal, you know, act, the whole sex act and all of that, which is, you know, for me, the initiation of a family unit, or the initiation of an extension of a family unit is that male-female interaction, whether it's mental or it's physical. It's the foundation and the building blocks for a family, because that bond or that connection between a male and a female, once they cross a certain point, again, either mentally or physically having sex, establishes a connection. So there is the potential for family that's there, that in a healthy system would be built upon, nurtured, cultivated, and all of that. Whereas in this one, it's just used as a commodity. It's just used as a way to satiate, you know, immediate drives and whatnot. And there's nothing substantive or responsible to the community behind that. But our drive and our push, because we've always had extended families. I was listening to Dr. Carr, and he was running down some things this weekend on this one show I listened to, and discussing the extended family, essentially in our community, and historically how it worked. It's like everything else. The fundamentals of our community struggles to express itself, but we don't recognize it. So it continues to simply just get capitalized upon. Because let's face it, the more our families and whatnot have broken down, the more they've benefited from it. Every time there's a breakdown somewhere in our family, they benefited from it, from whether it's the penitentiary, you know, cats in drama with baby mama, or because somebody's having to make money doing something they quote unquote shouldn't be doing in order to make money. Somebody goes to jail, or it's the what do you call it, the social, the Medicare, welfare, and all of that system. So they benefit from every part of our traditional mindset, and this breaking down of what we call family. You know, Dr. Carl was talking about how back in the day there was no maybe it was Mr. Farrakhan, it was one of the two, but there was no daycare, or there was no orphanage, because if a woman's husband died, that man's brother would take on the responsibility of that woman and her children. So there was no need for an orphanage or for welfare. If the mother died, the children went to live with, you know, another family member automatically. You know, there was no old folks home because you didn't put your mama out. You know, your elders stayed with you. So there was no need for a convalescent center and a nursing home. So those are even insane asylums. There were no insane asylums. It was John Henry Clark. No, it was Doc Ben. It was Doc Ben this weekend. There weren't even really any insane asylums because people didn't lose their minds the way they're losing them now, because our mental stability is intimately tied to this overall social structure. You know, this extended family is our mental health. Europeans are the one who came along and boiled it down to a husband, a wife, and 2.5 children and a dog. That's what family is to them. For us, family is everybody. Just, one of the things that we love to do, at least when I was coming up, was a family reunion. Family reunion was like a big deal. You get cats from all over the country coming down. When I was a kid, showing up, people you ain't never seen, looking at the girls and be like, man, I hate you, my cousin, all of that type of stuff. So family reunions and family in general has always been something that, we can't get away from because we're African people. And until that part of our reality begins to heal itself, we really don't have a chance, because we're not individuals. We identify ourselves based on our position in the family. We define our reality based on, who am I to you? Who are you to me? And we're conscious of that. We still do that. Everybody does it, but we're conscious of it and developed our family and our social structure around that. So yeah, me personally, I got no family. See, family for y'all meant one thing, because you got to remember, the side of my family that I was closest to coming up was the side of my family that oppressed the other side of the family that I wanted to be close to, but who really didn't want nothing to do with me and my mama, So I had that dichotomy, like, family is trying to figure that out coming up. So the whole family thing is kind of a different beast for me. You had a bunch of cousins and all of that running around. I didn't have all that. Christmas, Thanksgiving dinners and stuff were way bad compared to, the other side of the family. So there's that in between reality as well. The European concept of family and the African concept of family and how they mesh and all of those types of dynamics.
But
those are black folks.
Let me say this. Thank you for starting off addressing the point of reference in which people look at family, and then you kind of went all off into your own personal thing.
We was talking about what is family to us. That's what defines what your family, what family is, depends squarely on what your family has been for the past, how old are you? 40, 50 years. Now, I'm just saying, what's family to your typical average black folk, for me, is completely foreign. I don't know nothing about it.
What we're moving into now is this aspect of what it makes a family dysfunctional. But the idea here was, what is traditionally looked upon as the point of reference of a family. You see, and you defined it. You went into it because, like you was getting at, the bottom line to it is, you said black folks look at family, should a lot of times look at family as just any and everybody. Up such and such up the street, you become family. And I can give you a good example on that. Dark Side used to my next door neighbor, who was my best friend, family, because his mother and my next door neighbor's mother and father did a lot more in terms of embracing and raising him than his own biological family. But with that being said, we embrace the idealisms as Black people tend to embrace idealisms of coming together and building strength behind each other as family.
That's bullshit.
What's that?
Why you call it idealism? That's not idealism. That was an actual factual documented structure. That wasn't ideal.
I say ideal because this is how we grew up. Do you see that now?
In a less conscious, much more perverted way? Fuck yeah. Yeah, you do.
Much more perverted way, okay.
Much more perverted. It's very perverted. But the pulling people together, the social structure, just like Syke just got through saying, with cats want to be a part of this. So because you had young, undeveloped minds now leading the communal family, they turned into bangers. I mean, the social structure of a clique, a crew, a gang, or whatever is essentially, it's African in its essence. I mean, that whole drive that it comes from. Cats don't join gangs because it's just there to do it because motherfuckers are missing, usually that male presence in their life. And so they're looking for their manhood. And so our manhood is based on and defined by the community, i.e. rites of passage. So we join gangs. So we're looking for that manhood in the community. That's us, that's all day. That's 10,000, 100,000 years worth of experience. It's still there. So you can't say it's not there. It's bastardized, it's dysfunctional as fuck, but it's still there. If it wasn't there, it would never be a part. It could not be there if it ever was there. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? If it ever existed, it's always going to exist because it's always within us.
So let's go in then and break down the definition of a dysfunctional family.
Every family is dysfunctional. I've never seen a non-dysfunctional family, Black, white, brown, Vietnamese, or otherwise. All of them are dysfunctional simply because there's always going to be some shortcoming. I forgot, Rashida brought it to my attention, my oldest daughter, a few years ago. She brought it to my attention. She didn't know how to fill out an envelope to send it in the mail. I was like, what? She said, yeah, you taught me all this stuff about Black and Africa and all that. You forgot to teach me about, simple shit like putting an envelope in the box. So there's always something, some function that family does not address. That's just gonna happen. That's just the way it is. You can't address everything much as you might want to, So every family is dysfunctional off of jump. Ours, far more so because of our experiences here in the hells of North America, from the pits of nigga hell, So, I mean, all of the social ills that we're looking at in the community are a result of somebody capitalizing off the dysfunction that was created by us being kidnapped and enslaved for the past 400 years. All of it. Baby daddies, hopping around from plantation to plantation, having babies. Being the house nigga versus the field nigga. I mean, it all stems out of the same expression, or the same experience.
Well, I like the point you touched on, and I want Syke to build on it a little more if he can. And that kind of goes back to what conditions brought us here as Black people, because when you go back to the aspects of captivity in dealing with slavery, you see where the idealism of what they call buck breaking, and that's breaking down the powerful male image before his actual family, and seeing to it that he doesn't carry the strength that he's supposed to carry within the family, and then obviously pulling our children and pulling the women apart, and our women being able to be taken advantage of by the slave owners and by the other people that, from the European perspective. And then us as men having to deal with that. And at the same time, them going back to buck breaking, taking advantage of us and doing homosexual things with the male in order to make him look humiliated and broken down to his family. And now us living on the outskirts of all of that embedded aspect within the family. even as it applies to the modern day aspect of what they do with, welfare, like Psych talked about, how the male can't be in the house in order for the woman and the children to receive welfare. So to me, when we talk about that, that ties into the aspect of dysfunctionality. So Psych, talk on that some.
Well,
All of it feeds into it. Oh,
what do you say?
I say all of it feeds into it. All of it.
Well, I wanted to say this. I want to go into this a little bit when he was saying that there is no family that's dysfunctional. I think he may be looking for perfect functionality, but when we deal with functionality, the question is, with functionality is a thing doing what it was created to do, like a car. Does it do what it's created to do? Now, this car might not perfectly, be the perfect driving vehicle on the road, but if it's doing what it's created to do, then it has functionality. And I think that that's what we have to look at when it comes to family. Now, I know we all gonna have different perspectives of family, but we got to ask ourselves, what is the functionality of the family? What is the purpose of the family? We talked about like the overall biological purpose of sex. When you ask what's the purpose of sex, people say to feel good, to bind with another, this, that, that. But the overall biological purpose of sex is to reproduce. The overall biological purpose of food is to get nutrients for the growth of the body, period, point blank. The fact that it tastes good is just if certain foods taste good, it's just an add-on. And the purpose of the family is somewhat like a cocoon to the newly born human. The family's purpose is to protect, teach, educate, and bring up the newly formed human beings. That's the purpose of the family. That's why I said earlier that that's the function of the family. That the family was the nucleus of the society itself. The family was the first organization, because people come together for reasons. They don't come together just because I like you so much. People come together and build organizations for survival purposes. And without the family, the human being would not have been able to survive. The human being needs the protection and the teachings of the family to survive. Coming up, the different men in my family taught me many things, and there are many things they didn't teach me, because my family was extremely dysfunctional. But there are certain things that just came out naturally. Taught me how to properly use the restroom, taught me how to talk to women, taught me how to fight. They teach you these things as much as they know. And that's what the family is. The family becomes that training ground to prepare the human being for dealing with the rest of the world. And I think that's what makes it functional. Now, what makes it dysfunctional is when the family has been so mutilated that it can no longer do that. And he was pointing at something earlier that makes me remember go back to Behold the Pale Horse. What's the cat name that wrote the book? I can't remember his name.
William Cooper.
Yeah, William Cooper. Makes me think about that, because if you think about it, if what I just said is true, and the family is the nucleus of the community, of the society, if you ever want to destroy people, then what you would do is you would start at the nucleus. You would start and you would rip apart the very thing that actually builds the entire community. You would tear that down, and you could see certain things that has happened to the community or happened to the family that basically destroys the community. Because if there are no strong families in the community, how can the community be strong? Imagine this. He stay in the country somewhere, so I don't know. Imagine this, War. You stay in a neighborhood, your whole block. The whole block is strong, united, powerful families. Now, when you have something like that, can you really imagine somebody not from y'all block coming over or breaking into a house? Can you really imagine that? I mean, that's not going to be allowed to happen. Now imagine there being a whole bunch of weak families on drugs, won't work, don't care about nothing. Now, can somebody come into y'all neighborhood that's not from there and break into a house?
Yeah, because it'd be more of an individual mentality. So it'd be like every household for themselves. So
Exactly.
you start getting into the dynamic of what ties families together with a community. And so even on that same note, when I think about the dysfunction, kind of more or less what I was looking toward is the fact that the things that bring families together traditionally, or what we like to look at, especially from a tribal standpoint, are So we build around our strengths. Whereas when I think of dysfunctional family units, they come together through their weaknesses. And so, in other words, oftentimes they don't share similar interests. They may not share similar traits. They may not share um, similar vision in terms of projecting and creating strength for the next generation. But what brought them together was a common bind on their weaknesses. And so, in other words, it's like it's kind of like what you was talking about a strong individual or strong families from the standpoint of a street tribe. Well, now a lot of times you got two people that come together because they both feel like they've been picked on, or they both feel like they're getting the short end of the stick in life, and that causes them to build a sense of connection. So that's what I'm thinking about when I talk about the dysfunctionality, is people building relationships based upon their connection to their weaknesses, not their connection to their strengths. But when you talk about a family that are people, the two people that bond because of their victimization, then what happens is as they attempt to tackle these victimizations, what they grow apart because they didn't come together because of strengths. So therefore they're not building a family unit or a family structure based upon a mindset of projecting the next generation to be stronger. They came together because they both share a common bind in terms of hurt. And by doing it and building a family that way, the dysfunction goes into, well, what is it out of this family unit that we can be great in? And then they just kind of muddle in their victimization. And so therefore, a lot of what's built from that will separate them later on in life as the two starts getting their own feet and moving away from their victimization. So when I talk about tying a family together through dysfunctionality, we're talking about families that are created because of weaknesses versus being created out of the strengths. So that's kind of what I was getting at on that.
Well, I would say every family is dysfunctional simply because the individuals involved are dysfunctional. You know, if you have a vehicle, that vehicle doesn't do every single thing. It's dysfunctional. It's not meeting it's not doing exactly as it was intended to do. There's a theory about the car, but the application is not quite meeting up to that. So there's a theory of what family is, what it should be, all of these things, but the application, at least in this society, never meets up to that because there's always going to be some fault. There's always going to be something missing. And the two, especially from where we are, we're always going to unite to some degree on some level around that pain, because that pain is so completely ingrained in our experience that most of us, especially if we've not done things like shadow work, are not in the mind space to build on anything but that pain because we're not consciously aware of that pain. And so that pain becomes a driving force in our subconscious, and we unite around it. Oh, I love her, I love him, not realizing that even your definition of love is just something that gives you a momentary reprieve. You know, we say, well, why do you love her or him? Because they make me feel good. So when they stop making you feel good, you no longer love them. That's what you're saying? So our concepts of the most fundamental are damaged and dysfunctional and based upon pain and fear. The most fundamental thing we can identify with, particularly in this society, is fear. The first thing we experience in this reality is fear. So we spend our entire lives attempting to get away from that fear or getting away from that sensation of fear, and anything that gives us that momentary relief from fear, we say we love that thing or we like that thing. So then somebody comes along and fills that void and we like that thing or we love that thing or that person or whatever it is. And so we base our relationships around that. And until we get to a point where our sojourn, our oppression is no longer a defining factor for us in this world, we're not going to have functional families in terms of our definition of a functional family. You know, our family, my family, got my babies up. My oldest daughter's doing great, and all of these, I can say all of these things, but there are still things that they missed, and there are still things that they have to address, particularly on a community level, simply because the family we had was dysfunctional because it was based on those pains and those ideas and those misconceptions and all of those things that go into it. And I like the whole buck breaking thing, but for me, a more subversive, a less recognizable act or process or experience that we've had is that in which would cause sister to try to protect and keep her son from manning up. A boy gets to a certain point in life, he starts to become a man, he sees something wrong done to his mother, his sisters, or whoever, he wants to step out and protect them. That's our natural, psych acknowledged it, protection being a part of our role. And when we're not able to do that, with the sister, put a hand on our chest and push us back behind, and basically teaching men not to buck up to white folks. Don't put your chest out, bend over, put your head down, don't look them in the eye. All of those things that we had to do to survive, not knocking her, but the reality of it is when you take that over generations from a boy attempting to become a man, now his manhood is no longer tied into any sense of protection of the family. Now he's got to set all of that aside and be less than a man in order to just survive, and for his family to survive, and all of those things. So it becomes very insidious to the point we can't even recognize it. We can recognize buck breaking and that sort of thing, but a sister protecting her son, how do you argue against that? How do you tell a sister don't do that? How do you, it's damn near impossible. So yeah, it's all of it. Like I said, our reality is still there, but because of shadow work, because of our refusal to even discuss slavery, and that's one of the reasons we have to discuss slavery. We have to discuss the horrible bullshit that went on so that we can understand what's going on now. Why are men not standing up to protect the families anymore? Generationally, we've been told don't do that shit, both by the oppressor and by our own families have told us not to stand up. And that in itself could be argued as a dysfunction. Where the hell psych go?
I agree. I say the thing about that and calling it out has to do with the repair of it as well. So when we talk about the dysfunctionality and what pulls it together, we also need to get into what makes one functional. But Psych, you got anything to add on that before?
Well, I do have a question. The brother keeps saying shadow work, and if you're gonna discuss it, you got to build on it. You got to, everybody might not know what shadow work is. So I'm trying to understand. You saying that this shadow work is one of the ways to heal this dysfunction in the family. I think we need a little clue about what this is. Shadow work.
Why War looking at me like that? Well, I mean,
because you not me.
Huh?
Because you got the answer since you mentioned it.
Well, I can only put in very fundamental terms, without getting all Jungian and going into the complicated. It's really not complicated, but so there are things about ourselves that we don't like, things that are part of our subconscious reality that are there, that exist, but rather than to allow them to exist, we're taught always to press them down, to control them, to keep them in check, and that sort of thing. And we should know at this point that anytime you press anything down and refuse to give it its expression, that it's going to rebel, it's going to kick back, it's going to come out in one way or another. And one of the ways in this situation, in this particular field, is that we act out. We say, what is it? The things that we dislike most in other people are usually the things that we express most commonly ourselves. So if there's something in someone else that we see that we don't like, a sort of shadow work is to reflect on how we are expressing that very thing, and then begin to work to integrate that characteristic into our personality, into our conscious personality. In other words, give that trait, those emotions, those whatever you want to call them, a space to express, to feel themselves, to be a part of the reality, so that they don't drive what it is we do on a subconscious level, so that they don't end up taking over without us even being consciously aware of it. You know, like the thing with the sisters not or encouraging Black male youth to put their head down, to not buck up, to not stand up to the system, to just go along and get along. In a communal sense, we would need to work on that entire idea and support the opposite, so that, because our manhood, rather than being directed where it needs to be directed in an intelligent way, I ain't saying go and lash out, but instead of it being directed and allowed to express, given voice, we are taught to press that down. We are taught, again, to keep our heads down. And when we're taught to keep our heads down over there, we come back to the community and that head comes out. You know, we pop our head out, we put our chest out when we're walking down our own neighborhoods. But let us go into, you know, the white collar or whatever it is, the corporate world, surrounded by a bunch of white folks, and all of a sudden, we put our heads down. You know, it expressed itself. Cassidy will roll through the street shooting up the neighborhood, but then won't go to Jasper or someplace and carry a rifle and buck up to the man. That sort of thing. You're not bucking up to the man, so you're gonna go back and you're gonna buck up to your own kind. So, but we don't identify it consciously and address it. We just keep pushing it down. And so it comes out in ways that we don't, that are not beneficial to us. I don't know if that.
Because we talked about this dysfunctionality. What are some of the roles of family, of people in the family? What are roles that define the family? From y'all perspective, y'all point of view. Boy, you muted.
You muted.
I would say the thing about a role that defines the family unit kind of goes into where the common bond that the two people have, or should I say the family members have, in terms of perspective that they play within the family. And again, to me, that kind of gets back, that can teeter back and forth on the dysfunctionality itself. Because, for instance, let's say you got two crackheads that form the family. Well, the one that can bring the most crack home so that they can bond together, that would be his role.
Yeah.
Is that a productive role? No. But guess what? That's what links the family together. That's what they build their strengths from. They build their strengths from their abusive, their self-destructive abusive behaviors. And so from that standpoint, hey, my role is I know where to get the best crack at. The other person's role may be, hey, I know how to and I don't know nothing about crack smoking. So I'm assuming here, I know how to build the best crack pipe so that we can share it together. So the roles are typically goes into being defined according to what drew them together. So whether we talking about it from a family that operated or operates through a cohesion of functionality or a cohesion of dysfunctionality, that defines what the role is. When we get into the idea of roles, it really should play a perspective on what it is I bring to the family and what it is I do for the family, and making sure that each person within that family unit has a well-defined role within well-defined parameters, so that you can get the most out of each perspective or role within the family. That don't mean that they can't engage into some of the same affairs. It just has to do with the fact that, hey, this is primarily the strengths that I bring to the family, and these may be the strengths that you bring to the family. And what we do is we build upon those things, or we build upon those ties in order to strengthen the family. So when you talk about roles, that's where the units come together, and whatever it is that created that common thread amongst them, building a connection or building a relationship. That's how you start defining the roles. But again, if we're living in an area like Brother E was saying, things are so perverted. Let me just use that word because that's the things that pop into mind. Things are so perverted. The outside perspective on what the roles should be versus what the roles actually are could be completely different. Especially if you start looking at things from the standpoint of sexual identity, because that kind of goes into the perversion from that standpoint. The person that looks like the man may not be the male figure within the family because of that type of perversion. So even though the one that looks like a male, or should I say the one that is a male that may not look like a male, better put, the role that generally would be placed upon a male may not necessarily be the same role that this person has now. And that goes into what reference point defined what the family is. And that's the best I can say starting this off.
He said, what reference point define what the family is?
Well, yeah. I mean, if our reference point is right now, then there are no roles in the family anymore. There are no defined roles. It's all, which I didn't realize this until I was reading some stuff the other day, but during the end of the Roman Empire, this whole gender identity bullshit was a part of that reality as well, which makes sense because the family has already been obliterated. So the next step would be to completely pervert or to skew the individual roles, to the individual identities, so that now you can't even put the family back together based on what you have with the individuals, because you got women that want to be the man and men that are acting like the woman, and you can't have the two acting as something else within a relationship and expect it to go smoothly, let alone be actually productive. You know, it's a slap in the face to tell a woman, I'm gonna tell you from where I'm sitting, to tell a woman that her primary role in a relationship or in a marriage, and just call it a marriage, is to maintain the household. It just is. In this society, that's a disgrace. That's a slap in the face. That's a put down. I can do whatever a man do. Wah, 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 wah. Never seen so many women fight so many battles to be able to join the military so they can go and kill somebody. That alone tells you that there's this massive reality fuck up. I'm losing my vocabulary because I don't interact with humanity anymore. So I'm having to look for words a lot more. But that is an indication, that in itself, that women are so adamant about going off to murder, to kill people. When you have that part of the union of the relationship of the male, female, the yin and yang of it, that is supposed to nurture life and to give birth to life and to bring life into the world, now so wanting and willing and ready to go out and murder and to take life. That alone should tell us how deeply into this bullshit we are. You know, Madeleine Albright, they asked her, she used to be the Secretary of State under, I think, Junior George Bush back in the day. But they asked her if the death, they dropped some bombs and shit, and they asked her if the death of all these thousands of Iraqi children was worth, you know, the invasion and whatnot. And she was basically like, yeah, we killed a bunch of, you know, Iraqi brown families and children and whatnot, but it was worth what it was we were trying to accomplish. This is a woman. This is a mother. This is that part of the society that's supposed to rock the babies to sleep and whatnot, you know. And again, in this society, that's an insult, because taking care of the family is is something that is not valued in this society. Destroying other families, gaining and capitalizing and coming up, those things are valued. So everybody wants to do that. It's more important to be the head of Yahoo, which was a woman at a time. I don't know if it still is. It's more important to be the head of Lockheed Martin, which was a woman at one point. I don't know if it still is. But all of these female CEOs and the families are going to shit. This idea of you can have a family and a career is bullshit. One is going to suffer. I don't care how you look at it. One is going to suffer. That's just the way it is. And so the more we've bought into these individual ideas, the more the family has suffered because we don't have anything to build on anymore. It's just not there. And I mean, by and large, I ain't talking about one or two people here and there. Okay, y'all are lovely, woohoo, whatever. I'm talking about society as a whole. There's nothing to build on. You don't have men anymore because you don't have a definition of manhood. You don't have women anymore because you don't have a definition of womanhood. You know, womanhood is getting a job, making bank. I don't need no man. That's a woman. I'm a boss. I'm a diva. All this bullshit. That's a woman. No, it's fucking not. But those are the individual identities that we've been sold and bought into, and you cannot make those click together. You have the male trying to be a male and the female aspiring to male, traditionally male roles. It's not going to work. There's going to be some kind of issue going on. It just did. And so, yeah, that our point in time, our reference point, absolutely defines it. Because of choice and because of circumstance, you know, sisters have had to step up and be the quote unquote mother and father of a family, the head of the family, which is, you know, not going to work. We know that. We've seen that. But because of choice and circumstance, she's been put in a position where she's had to do that. Historically, she ain't have to do that. But at this point in time, she's had to do that. Which I guess is, you know, Mr. Farrakhan likes to talk a lot of time and dump on brothers. I don't want to say dump on them, but accurately point out all of this shit is our fault. The first thing the enemy does is try to get rid of the males so he can gain access to the females. Because he gains access to the females, he can take over an entire people without firing a shot, which is what he's done. Don't believe me? Ask Serena. Damn it.
Ask who?
Serena Williams.
Why? I missed that. Never me understand that.
Because she, as African as she looks and wonderful as she looks, she got her pink toe. I'm just saying, all of these brother athletes with big money and all of that shit, and she goes and gets the no shoulders having, no arms having, no completely emasculated white boy. You know, rather than some brother who would match her, you know, physically, financially, all of that type of shit. She went and got a white boy.
Well, I'm gonna be idealistic when I talk about the reference point of the roles of the family. Like I said, I believe a family is the society's first organization. And in any organization, you need, Malcolm said it in the autobiography of Malcolm X, even if you just got two people, you need somebody to lead. You need somebody to direct the movements of the organization. So that's one of the roles that you have to have. You have to have someone whose responsibility it is to represent the needs and the desires of the organization or the family. You can call that the head of the family, the leader, the father, whatever you want to call it. Then, just like any organization, you're going to need an economist. You're going to need somebody to deal with the economics of the family. You're going to need somebody to deal with the defense of the family. These are things that are needed for the proper development of any organization. And you'll probably notice that families, at least halfway functional ones, have these roles, even if they're not aware of them, even if they haven't sat down and blueprinted these roles and defined these roles, they are there. There's somebody who deals with the economics. Members of the family call to borrow money from when they're in a bind, because they know that Sister Sally always got it, or that Uncle Joe Bob always has it. They know that they can call Uncle Joe Bob and he's gonna come through in a clutch. That's who everybody call when they need to make bail or whatever it is. They call Uncle Joe Bob. There's somebody in the family that Oh, no, you go, all right, I'm gonna go get my big cousin Ray Ray. There's somebody to deal with the defense of the family. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's organized or not. I just believe that it'll make it stronger and create help the family become more powerful if it's recognized and then organized and structured. You know, but there are people that plays these roles in the family, whether we're aware of them or not. And you're right, because of where this society is at, the family has fallen into further and further dysfunctionality. And I believe that's by design. I don't believe it's accident that the family has went where it's went. I don't believe that it's accident that so many of the men were so completely wiped out or moved out of the family, whether through welfare when the men was not allowed to be in the home, or the woman would lose her benefits, is what they call it. They call them benefits, gave it and then we got to understand, when we understand propaganda, we got to understand that these terms are used intentionally. Because when you hear benefits in your mind, you don't think of a handout anymore. You know what I'm saying? Man, I'm going to lose my benefits if I let E be in here. E, you got to hide in the closet. And when E hides in the closet, while the person comes in the house to make sure ain't no man living there, even though E is still there, E has just been emasculated because he's hiding in the closet again. You know what I'm saying? And so these are things that I think participated at E prison. Look at how many black men have been sent to prison throughout the years that the prison industrial complex was first built. And from that time, you got so many of these men. You're very rarely. It's to the point when you make parole, they tell you that do not be around felons. But it's impossible not to be around felons because everybody in your family is a felon. So they don't even stress that anymore because there's no way that you can avoid being around a felon. So all these women lose their husbands, all these children lose their fathers to prison, as he was saying earlier, basically doing the things that they believe they have to do in order to try to put food on the table or to put a fresh pair of socks on their feet. So these are a lot of the things that have helped destroy the family. And then you have other things, don't want to get, you have other things that have played a role in actually flipping the gender roles around. As we talked about earlier about the strong woman, I don't need a man, this idea. We got to ask ourselves, where did this come from? Where did this idea come from? Have women been weaponized against men? Have men been weaponized against their own community? Because we can't leave that out. Because what about, as you said earlier, E, when he can't fight his true enemy, where does he bring that aggression and that anger back to? To his own home, to his own community. So he's in his own streets, murdering, killing, pillaging, robbing, destroying in his own community. So maybe this anger and this frustration have been weaponized, been used to weaponize him against his own community. George Jackson talks about it in Blood in My Eye. I can't remember the exact quote, I wish I did, but I'm gonna paraphrase it to a certain degree. He says that basically whenever you see the average dude in the streets robbing, killing, raping, whenever you see the rebel in a village fighting back against the authority, whenever you see any of these acts that seem in some way dysfunctional against society, what you are looking at is that natural drive and desire for a man to be free. That's what you're looking at, but he don't know how to express the freedom. Because he feel like every ability to express their freedom has been snatched from him. So he acts out in these ways. He's basically screaming, "I want to be free. I want to be free."
And that's the essence of the shadow work, is self-actualizing. You know, that part of our manhood to express ourselves as men has been snatched from us on a broader societal level. We can't go out into the world. We can't go to our jobs without hanging our balls on at the door. We can't go in there as fully formed, fully actualized black men. We can't do it simply because if we apply ourselves, if we act with any type of self-determination, they're going to say it's a threat, just because of the perception that they have of us. So we have to leave all of that outside when we go and we deal with the social order in a broader sense, and not able to actualize it, and so it acts out when we come back home. And likewise, if you ever looked at older TV shows, black and white, and I Love Lucy and older stuff like that, there were role definitions, and part of that was like you would have the husband would come home and ask his wife about the books, you know, about the you know, spending this much on groceries. They would have that conversation. Her primary role in that balance, while he was out dealing with the world, she was at home dealing with the home. And there used to be a thing when I was in school called home economics, you know. So, and at one point in time, it was primarily females in there before they got rid of it. I don't think I've been across a school anymore that still has home economics, again, because it's not socially acceptable. But that idea of the economics, whatever it is he brings home in terms of money, she addresses the needs of the family based on that. So there's this balance. There's this yin and this yang of it, you know what I'm saying? And that sort of dynamic people were aware of, in control of, and were able to let it express itself. It wasn't a nasty thing. It wasn't, you know, all of that. So but it got pressed down on an individual level. And again, to the point that we're not able to actualize ourselves as so-called individuals to you know, define ourselves. That's, what is it? What are they calling it? Some type of, what is it? Masculinity, toxic masculinity. And you sit on a bus or a subway, dude, and you got your legs cocked open like we all sit down in a chair. We got our legs sitting like men sit. Oh, there are people that I've seen several videos of folks, usually white chicks. These chicks got some real problems, going ape shit crazy because this dude got his legs sitting. He ain't showing nothing, nothing's hanging out. He's just sitting there with his jeans on and his legs spread like we always do. But now all of a sudden, even that just, you know, just stupid shit is a point of you know, aggression and people bumping heads. You know, anything that definitively male, that's not PC. Anything that's definitively female, that's not PC. And so again, as I said, until those things are addressed and the individuals can really actually express the essence of what it is they are, family don't have a chance, because family is a step up. You know, the foundation of the family is still the individual. So as long as the individual doesn't want to abide by rules, regulations, you know, definitions and all of that, you're not going to have families. You're going to have a bunch of people, a bunch of individuals doing individual shit.
Well, let me add this part to that, and maybe we can build off that, because I think what we're talking about is the difference between natural law and physiology versus what I want to identify with. So what we're living in a society now, especially as we move more toward virtualization and more toward the social construct that where it allows anybody to be what they feel like versus what they actually are and physically like. And so from going into what you was talking about, that toxic masculinity, that has to do with the fact that now you have a society that says, if I want to identify with being a male, your actual physical presence of being a male or physiology of being a male intrudes on what I want to identify with. And so that is really where that concept of toxic masculinity come from. I may want to identify with something that you naturally are. And so that natural actually supersedes what I want to identify with. And so I have to find a way to attack that. And that's the weaponization aspect that Sykes talking about. So now that we're dealing with a society that allows people to operate off of what they want to identify with versus what they actually are, that changes the dynamic and the scope of what roles are. Because now your role ain't based upon what you naturally or more capable of doing for the relationship. Is based upon what you feel like doing and what you want to identify with within the relationship. And so now society bends itself around being able to allow what's referred to as neutrality between every aspect of two beings coming together. So in other words, everybody's neutral. So whether you a man or whether you a woman, whether you young or whether you old, we all share a neutral part in this relationship. And now we come together and we build this family structure based upon what we want to identify with within the constructs of that family. And that is where it has been weaponized against us as a people, because we fall for that bait. We fall for the aspect of, oh, this gives me an opportunity to step outside of my true self, step outside of what I naturally am and become something different. If I'm an elder within a family, I want to identify with the youth. So now all of a sudden, regardless of what I really am, I'm a 20-year-old person within a relationship. So therefore, I'm coming at you like a 20-year-old, and you can't step on or interfere with the identity that I want to bring to the relationship. And so we've allowed the definition of what a family structure and family unit is to be morphed because of that individuality and that input to be able to shake and shift the family, basically, from where I'm seeing, so that you can tear down the foundation and rebuild it to be something totally different that can be manipulated and controlled from the standpoint of how they want to control the masses, by keeping the masses fighting against each other and fighting against themselves. So our self-identity has been weaponized against us through natural law. So we live out of sync with natural law, and we can identify with something that is not who we really are.
That's white folk. White folk always have had a problem with that sort of thing. Well, white males have never historically, I mean, you look at Greece and all of them dudes were screwing each other, you know, and with England and all of that, with the wigs and the perfume and the makeup and all of that. There's always been a skew within their society, within their reality. And now, having lived up under that for so long, we've taken on that, you know, having no culture of our own, having less and less, again, because we identify and define ourselves by our relationship to the community. Having less and less of that, we've bought more and more into their reality, and it's causing us to self-destruct, because it is, you know, when we're not able to self-actualize, again, we pick up the things that are placed in front of us and we lash out in whatever way we can. If we see this as a route to power, which in this instance is, you know, self-expression, that's a form of power, and when that's taken away from us, we start taking up the expressions of or the power of expressing whatever it is that society defines as acceptable. So, you know, all these dudes in these skinny jeans, that's acceptable. So we roll with it because we have no other societal definitions, no direction, no guidance to tell us that this is how a man carries himself. So he wears his pants down around his ankles and shit and nonsense like that. So again, we don't have those definitions. We don't have those as individuals. We have no accountability. We have no responsibility. There's no attachment. And this whole COVID lockdown bullshit nonsense is like a nail in the coffin, because one of the things, if you want to control the masses of people, is to dissolve those connections between the individuals within a society. When you have people locked up in their house for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and especially turning to now the metaverse and all of these things, you have less and less of the ability for a community to define or sustain or maintain is drifting apart. And I think that's a major push for this entire AI thing is that as the analog world, the actual physical people world, becomes less and less productive, because the most productive times in an individual's life is when that individual is a part of a community, productive in terms of a community. But as we become less and less necessary, as we become less and less, as we become less connected to one another, the less productive, the less necessary we are. So we get replaced, you know. So yeah, I think that all of that, I mean, it's it's tangly, it's a mesh, it's dirty, it's messy. And for me, it still just breaks down to those definitions given to individuals along the way. You know, when Rashida was a little bitty girl, Psych checked me one time about telling her that she was a queen. And I've gotten, these days, I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to see sisters saying on none of them profiles or no place else, I'm a queen waiting for my king. Bullshit. You ain't got no queendom. Ain't no dude got no kingdom. Stop doing that bullshit. But the difference is when I was telling Rashida that, we didn't just stop at you're a queen. The call and response went further. You know, what is a queen? A servant. Who do you serve? My people. And when you serve the people, who are you serving? God. So there was a definition in there behind it. It wasn't just this word that we splashed up like we do today, you know, and that's a big part of the problem is everything is surface level. And we live on king and queen, not really. Psych, you like to point out empires. I see folks talking all the time, yeah, I'm gonna build my empire. Because it sounds cool, sounds good. It's a TV show, rah, rah. It sounds, you know, Roman Empire and empire this and empire that. Not realizing what an empire actually is. There's no definition behind it. And likewise, I can say, oh, I'm a man. No definition behind it. It took me, I wasn't until I was in my 30s till I started saying, okay, I'm a man. I feel like a man now. Because my definitions in my head was my pops, Malcolm X, and Lord forgive me, James Evans Sr. on Good Times. Yes, I said that. But this is the picture I had in my head of manhood that I needed to live up to. And it was only until I felt like, okay, cool, I'm living up to these particular requirements. Okay, now I'm a man. Now every 12-year-old with a cell phone that can call 911 on his mom and dad, mama, whoever, for doing something thinks he a man. You know, every 13-year-old that's out there on the corner at late in the night after hours, slanging and whatnot, thinks he's a man because he's making money, because that's the definition of it. So again, definitions are the most essential thing that to family, to individual, to whatever it is, having those definitions in place. And we don't put any type of energy into defining that, again, because it's not PC. To have a definition is not PC. You cannot define me. I heard, what's her name? That stupid girl, and I hate it because she was such a cute little girl. What's her name? Raven Simone, the little light-skinned girl on Cosby Show, you know? She said she don't want to be defined as African-American. She's on one of those talk shows. Rah, rah, rah. I'm not Black, I'm not African-American. I don't want to be defined. I'm just American. But wait a minute. You don't want to be defined, but you just defined yourself as an American. You use that screwed up motherfucker. Definitions are the things that define, that create life. You don't have definition, you don't have life. Your skin is a definition, defines you from, you know, this laptop, from the wall, from the air around me. You take that skin away, you're done. A single cell organism has a membrane around the outside of it to define its existence. You take that membrane away, it dies. So without these definitions, it's not the definition like everything else. It's not the definition, it's not the words, it's not the roles, it's not the identities, it's how they've been used. Everything that's out there gets used in a way to manipulate and to control. So
well, let's say this, E, because you hitting it right on point. And she said that she doesn't want to basically identify with being an African American or an African. That's because she is going into how I want to see myself. And like when you talked about with the metaverse. So now I think we can speak a little bit on that, because from that perspective, again, this gives people an ability to escape natural law. Natural law says this: I'm from a dark skin hue. That dark skin hue come from the continent of Africa. My people, my bloodline comes from Africa, period, point blank. Well, if I'm allowed to identify with something other than that, where can I best do that? That's where social media is heading. It's heading in a position to where people can define who they are, what they are, and why they are according to what they feel like versus what they naturally are. And I think that is, in essence, how the weaponization of social media and virtualization is going. is because it causes people to have a form of escape instead of embracing and building upon a legacy, which is what family ties is supposed to be. Now I can build upon this individual, and I can virtualize and I can project how I want to be identified with versus what I really am. So then we can escape our strengths. You see, we don't build up from a position of fortifying our strengths and integrity and the building blocks of what made us from a foundational perspective on our past, which would be our ancestors, our relatives, our parents, our grandparents, and our great-grandparents. So instead of having that foundation of fortitude that you're supposed to build upon in order to strengthen that, which is called generational advancement, now you have this individual who can basically identify with everything as if they are the first to bring it to the table. So they can create this entire new construct. And by doing that, there is no legacy that you stand upon. And if you're not standing upon no legacy, then now you're dealing with a situation to where I don't have the social, tangible intimacy to where I know how to deal with my emotional state, yet alone my logical state, yet alone the physical actual world in which we live in. So going back to you saying how people are locked up and cooped up for 3 months and 6 months, which really shouldn't be a problem, but it is because the social bond that generations and families normally build are no longer there, because people operate through their projected self. And their projected self is based upon this identity, which even goes back into why the Black identity is considered a form of extremism and terrorism. Because when we want to deal with our legacy and what we are, that's considered a extreme identity.
Now that we've identified a lot of the problems and things that make our families dysfunctional, define family and identify some of the roles, next week we're going to come with part 2, where we build on some of the strategies and techniques that we can utilize to bring our families back closer to functionality so that we can start the process of rebuilding community. This was your Panther 48, and hopefully you gained some knowledge out of this video. Peace.